Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk about the books that I have bought in July. Now, in the last book haul that I did, which was a late spring book haul, I was talking and being kind of smug about the fact that I've not bought a load of books and I've been able to keep my TBR down. I'd been fairly restrained about buying books. And when I was looking this month at what I'd bought, I genuinely thought I hadn't really bought very many books this month and that there wouldn't be enough to do a book haul with. And it turns out that's not at all true. I have been buying a lot of books, but I think where the difference is to normal is that while I've been buying things, not all of these have been going onto my TBR, or I've read them straight away, so they've not stuck on my TBR very long. But I'm still buying books. This is still an accumulation. It's just that they've not been lingering very long, which, you know, is good in itself. I've got a few things here that are just being added to the collection, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but yeah. And then looking at my bank account and being like, oh, why is that lower than usual? This is why. Combined with the fact that I've got a couple of weddings coming up in the next few months, I must be stopped. But without much further ado, let's just get straight into these books, because there's a few of them. So the month's book buying all kicked off because I went into a charity shop and I saw something. It was a book that I'd already read, but in a beautiful edition. And I thought to myself, Charlotte, you don't need that. That is not a thing that you need. So I was really good and I walked away. And then a week later, I went back into said charity shop and it was still there. And I just thought to myself, I thought, nobody's going to love this as much as I am. So I've got to take you home with me. And it was this really gorgeous edition of Wallflower, this hardback edition that came out a couple of years ago when the new hardback of The Mirror and the Light came out. And as ridiculous as it is, this is now like my third edition that I've ever owned of Wallflower. It's so beautiful and it matches up with my Mirror and the Light. And so, of course, having bought this because it was inexpensive coming from a charity shop, I then decided that I had to order Bring Up the Bodies as well. I never said I make smart choices, but I also can't deny that this makes me really happy. Just imagine the hardback of The Mirror and the Light next to this. Like, it just brings me joy. Did I need either of these? No, I do not. I already own paperback copies of both of these, but they make me happy. You just can't deny what brings you joy. I then picked up a physical copy of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I had been listening to the audiobook of this because the audiobook that had been on Audible that was included in your membership, narrated by Richard Armitage, Be Still My Beating Heart John Thornton, was being taken off the Plus catalogue and I still hadn't listened to it. And I just thought before that gets taken off, I do need to. And I really quite enjoyed David Copperfield. I wouldn't say it's like my favourite of Dickens, but I do get what all the hype is about. And so I decided I did want to own a physical copy, but this was not being added to the TBR because I'd already listened to the audiobook. Next up is a new book that I snapped up as soon as I saw it, and that is The Bookbinder of Jericho by Pip Williams. You'll remember that I read The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams a couple of years ago. I have a review video for it, it's linked down below. I saw that she had a new book coming out, also set in Oxford, and so just decided I had to snap this one up. I've read this pretty much straight away and I really enjoy it. I think I will also make a review video for this one. This is about Peggy and Maud, who work at the Bookbindery at Oxford University Press, and particularly looking at Peggy as she tries and fails a lot of the time to break out of the mould and trying to better herself in the outbreak of World War I. The Dictionary of Lost Words does look at class distinctions and class differences, but this focuses a working class family, whereas Esme Nichols was definitely from a middle class family who had a lot of the education and work opportunities that Peggy just doesn't have. And so I thought this was a much richer story for it. But yeah, like I say, I want to talk about this a bit more in detail in an individual book review, so look forward to that. Then I have a few charity shop finds which are not going onto my TBR, but I wanted to just have for my collection. And the first one is A Curious History of Food and Drink by Ian Crompton. I actually did my dissertation on 18th century cookbooks, and so I've always had like an interest, a fondness for food history. I think this one would be a really cool like popular history, maybe one that I want to read eventually in my like beginners to history series that I'm always saying that I want to do, but it's not going to be one that goes on the immediate TBR. But I feel like this would be just a really accessible, fun history. Then I have a couple of children's history books because I've decided now that I do want to start a little collection of children's history books. Whenever I see one in a charity shop, I just feel like I have to pick it up. We have Women in Science, 50 Fearless Pioneers Who Changed the World, written and illustrated by Rachel Ignotofsky. I've seen these floating around. I think they're absolutely stunning, just illustrated to perfection and with actually quite a lot of detail about individual women. I might crack this one out next Herstory-a-thon. And then another children's history I picked up was Who Were the Romans, which is one of the Usborne starting point histories. I'm gonna have such fun reading this with my niece when she's a little bit older and is able to read some of this smaller, more complex writing. Bit of a random one that I picked up when I was in Sainsbury's was Dr. Michael Mosley's Just One Thing, How Simple Changes Can Transform Your Life. Picked this one up, read it straight away because I really enjoy his podcast, which is also called Just One Thing, which is a BBC Radio 4 podcast. Each episode they take just one thing that you can do to improve your health and well well-being, whether it's journaling, taking a cold shower, eating fermented foods, lots of different things, talking about the science behind these changes and how they can improve your health. And they're really short, snappy episodes. I think they're only about 15 minutes long. So it's a series that I have just listened to over and over again, just when I'm wanting a bit of a pep. And yeah, what I would say about this is that if you have listened to the podcast, you probably don't need to read this because it is reiterating a lot of the same facts. I wouldn't say the science in here is incredibly complex, but as a fan of the podcast, it is a nice thing to have. Then of course, it is a book haul from me, and would you expect a recent book haul from me to not include romance books? I mean, if you did, sorely mistaken. I've been in a bit of a mood recently to read some historical romance. You'll have seen from my most recent romance reads videos that I've been reading a lot of contemporary, and that's not very normal for me. I'm usually a good mix of the two. If you're ever wanting to get a romance book recommendation from me, just know it's either going to be historical romance or contemporary. I don't really go much in for paranormal or any of the other popular genres of romance. I had also, as is very typical for me, been listening again to the Heaving Bosoms podcast because it's one of my favourite podcasts. I can't help myself. And so I decided to pick up a couple of the historical fictions that they had mentioned either early in their podcast or that are quite popular episodes for them. One of those being 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake by Sarah MacLean. I think this might have to be one of my favourite book titles of a romance book, which was quite an early episode for them. In fact, I actually think that by the time this video comes out, that episode will have disappeared. There's been something weird going on recently. I think since they've surpassed 300 episodes, a lot of their backlist episodes are starting to be swallowed up. Anybody who's technical and knows things about podcasts, tell me why that is. Why is it that once you go past 300, old episodes end up getting eaten? It's really sad because it is a very, very good episode. I'd had this on my mind and wanted to pick it up. I'm currently about 3/4 of the way through it and really enjoying it so far. All about the main character of Calpurnia, who is a spinster, 28 in the Regency and unmarried, who decides that she wants to liven up her life and so makes a list of 9 things that young ladies are not meant to do, but that she is going to complete. So it's things like kissing somebody passionately, drinking scotch, attending a duel, shooting a pistol, smoking cheroot, all things that you would be absolutely ruined if people were to find out that you'd done. And while she's completing her checklist, she keeps on finding herself in the vicinity of Lord Ralston, who is a notorious rake. Their paths had really never properly crossed, though she'd always kind of admired him from afar. But the more they start to get to know each other, the more he starts to see that she's not so much of a wallflower as he'd thought, and feelings are going to start to come into play. Another absolute staple of the Heaving Bosoms podcast is The Devil in Winter by Lisa Kleypas. They love this book so much that every April they do a day that is dedicated to the hero, Sebastian St. Vincent, where they encourage their listeners to do things that Sebastian St. Vincent would do, mostly to do with self-care, because despite the fact that Sebastian St. Vincent is, once again, a notorious rake, and in the previous book in this series, I believe he actually kidnapped the female protagonist. In this book, he ends up being redeemed, though having not read that previous book, I don't know how much, but in the context of this book, he is very enjoyable, so I can see where the love comes from. And because I always like to read and talk about 3 romance books back to back for my videos, I also picked up The Wallflower Wager by Tessa. Read this straight away. You know that I love Tessa. This, I believe, is the 3rd book in the Girl Meets Duke series. I'd previously read The Duchess Deal. Haven't yet read The Governess Game, but went straight to this one because it was most widely accessible to me and sounded really interesting, with a main character who is just absolutely obsessed with animals, but that seems to be getting in the way of all of her neighbours. And then the final book to show you from this book haul is another new release, which is Disobedient by Elizabeth Freemantle. At the time of me filming this whole video, this book has literally just been released. Set in Rome in the early 17th century and following the artist Artemisia Gentileschi. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going into this one pretty blind. She is a historical figure that I've heard of before, but I don't actually know very much about her life. But I'm hoping for really good things. And considering I've seen so many quotes from great historical fiction writers, Elodie Harper, Jennifer Saint, Essie Fox, Costanza Cassetti, Alison Weir, I feel like I'm going to be in pretty solid hands with this one. I feel also just from the vibes of this book that this is one that Jennifer Brooks would really enjoy, though of course I can't say anything having not read it yet, but hopefully I really enjoy this one. I'd quite like to do a review of it if I have enough to say. But there we go, those are all of the books that I have picked up in July. I didn't think I'd actually bought that much, but looking at it behind me, ew. Thankfully though, my TBR pile is not straining under the weight of all of these because most of these I've already read, so that's not too bad going. Do let me know if you've read any of the books I've spoken about today and what your thoughts were on them. Alternatively, please let me know about anything that you picked up in July. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.